Hello, welcome back to the Armenian Museum of America. I'm Gary Lynn Sananian, and I'm here today to share a couple of religious works with you, the largest and one of the smallest religious books in our collection. This is a Chachotskirk, or lectionary. That is, it's a collection of passages of the Old and New Testament that are read during the liturgy at some point. The practice of having these readings, such as a passage from the Gospel of St. Luke or from the Old Testament, goes back to Jerusalem. And it developed around the 6th century in Jerusalem and spread to all Christian groups, and all Christian groups do this. This particular book was published in 1686. It is actually the first printed edition of a lectionary in the Armenian language. We're very fortunate to have this work given to us by Paul Vadukian. As you see, it's a large book. It weighs over 25 pounds, and it's all bound in leather. Beautiful printed edition here. And these are some of the pages of the printing. This was published in Venice. And it was, as you can see, these are book plates, engraved book plates of some of the designs that were used in the, for this edition of it. And a book like this would be used in the church for the readings, and this is a bit of theater. When you bring out a book this size, it is important by definition, and you put it there in order to read for the congregation. Don't forget, a lot of the congregation were illiterate. And so the priest reading this was very impressive. This book is important. Also, it's very large physically because it was used for public readings. Not the sort of book you would read to yourself. This would be something you'd be, as you're reading it, you're reading to your congregation. So it's a public work. And we're very fortunate to have this edition. The Martinadra only had one edition of this itself, but only recently had acquired a second copy of it. So we're very privileged to have this in our collection. The smallest book we have, or one of the smallest books we have, is a New Testament. This is a New Testament, very typical, 19th century. This was given to us by Queenie Boyajian. And the New Testament was particularly important for evangelical Armenians, Protestant Armenians. And so they could have this book, and they could personally read the passages from the New Testament every day. And it was part of their lifestyle. And in fact, there's a famous story, apocryphal story, about an Armenian congregation in Boston. This is before 1890. The Armenians had mostly evangelicals at that time, the earliest wave of them, many were evangelical. And they didn't have enough members to create a church. So what they did is they went to the basement of the Park Street Church in Boston. And so they used to have their congregation, they'd meet in the Park Street Church basement for their own meetings. And one day they heard about this American preacher who was real fire and brimstone. And he would give these public sermons, and you could hire him to do presentations at your church. And so they thought, well, let's get this guy to do it for us. And so this man was up there, an American, and he's given a sermon, and he's, how many of you carry Jesus next to your heart? And every Armenian in the congregation pulls out their little Bible right there, the New Testament, and showed him that they carried it. The man was shocked. It was the first time he had this kind of response when he gave that part of the sermon. And then he, of course, went back into the sermon. But it was just an illustration of how important and how ubiquitous this was among the early immigrants. The Armenian Museum is here to share our stories, our history, our culture with the public. We thank you for joining us. We thank the museum's president, Michelle Collegian, for making this series possible. We hope you'll join us here in Watertown Square at 65 Main Street. Until next time, stay safe.